2017, and if we can start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll ask Tom and Elizabeth to lead us tonight.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So, first on our agenda is open forum and announcements. First thing, I'm sure as everybody watching is noticing, we have 2 new members to the Board of Selectmen as a result of our elections last week, and we'd like to congratulate and welcome both Tom Clay and Elizabeth Almeida to the board, and we look forward to working with you and to your participation, and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And then the other congratulations that we would like to offer are to 4 students from the Westford Academy. We'd like to congratulate Nihar Seth, Harshel Sheth, Kartik Singh, and Aditya Velal. These 4 young men, please come forward. These 4 young men placed second in the Moody's Mega Math Challenge Finals, which is a national competition that involved 5,000 students from across the nation, and these are 11th and 12th graders. The competition gives students the opportunity to apply math skills and their knowledge to real-world problems. And this year, the problem was to use math modeling to predict the effect that climate change would have on our country's national park services, right? Okay. So my understanding is they modeled the effect of climate change and what it would what that effect would be on coastal national parks, and also the effect that change would have on the visitorship of the next 50 years for those parks. They had 14 hours to come up with a model, and they had to write a 20-page paper. If you guys, one of you or all of you, would like to tell us a little bit about ultimately what your results were and what the findings of your model were, I think we'd all really like to hear that. And then maybe you could pass them on to Washington. It was just a suggestion. And tell us who you are, okay?
Yeah, my name's Nihar. I'm a senior at WA this year, and I was one of the 4 people on the team this year. So basically what we had to do, as you explained, is we had to sort of predict how climate change is going to affect these coastal national park units. So if you think of national parks like Acadia, for example, that's the biggest example we can think of in this region of the country. It's right on the coastline, so as you have sea level rise, you have potentially hurricanes, wildfires, different sort of climate-related events. Those are going to impact the safety of visitors, and that's going to impact the national park's long-term revenue stream going forward because of those climate-related events. So basically what we had to do is we had to sort of model how sea level rise is going to affect different national parks, how potential hurricane threats or wildfire threats and those things will play into that, and then ultimately use that data to sort of model how the visitorship is going to change in the long run, next 50 years, at those national parks, and use that to sort of decide, help the NPS determine where they want to allocate their funds. So the findings we actually came up with, the problem asked us to focus on 5 particular national parks. And so Acadia was one of them, so I'll just sort of stick with Acadia since that's the one most of us are most familiar with out of the 5. And so that one, we actually saw there being a pretty significant decrease in number of visitors over the next 50 years as a result of the threats from climate change and other sort of events, climate change like hurricanes, wildfires, other sort of events. And then there are a few other national parks like Cape Hatteras down in North Carolina, which are really going to get sort of decimated by climate change because they're very much on the coastline, and those kind of things are going to have a big impact. So that's sort of what we did. We had to do it in 14 hours, so it was a pretty intense 14 hours. It was at our house. We sort of just sat down and churned through this paper. A lot of different outside data sources, trying to figure out what we wanted to use, what we didn't want to use, how to fit that into the model. And then ultimately, it went well for us. We got selected for the finals. We got to go to Moody's headquarters in New York City, present our solution there, and we won second, which was great. So,
well, congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well done.
Okay. Does anybody from the board have anything else for open forum? Anybody from the audience have anything for open forum? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to our 7:34 p.m. item, which is a request for direction regarding multifamily zoning along Route 110.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris Kletchman, Director of Land Use Management, and I'm going to go through a PowerPoint presentation. I'm here kind of on behalf of the Planning Board, looking for your feedback on multifamily zoning. But I'm going to take the opportunity just to hit on a couple other housing-related topics, just because I thought you might have some questions about it. But essentially, the main focus in terms of your feedback tonight will be about the multifamily zoning project. Next slide. So why are we talking about multifamily zoning along Route 110, and why would we maybe want to change our zoning? Well, because the master plan that was adopted in 2009 told us that we should do that. It had goals of multifamily along Route 110 and including mixed-use housing along 110, as well as some other places in town. But with the Affordable Housing Committee, we moved forward and started to focus on Route 110. In addition to the master plan, last year, you may recall, the Board of Selectmen was one of two boards that approved the housing production plan that is a very detailed look at housing in our community, which we've done every 5 years, and it provides lots of documentation of the fact that in Westford we have an affordability gap in our housing, and we need cheaper housing in order to meet the needs of our community. And I think it's pretty well known that, regionally and state-wise, that there's a need for additional housing options, and in particular rental housing and smaller housing units as the baby boom, continues on and will eventually leave large single-family housing. We need some more housing just in general as an entire state to accommodate that new need of housing. So, the multifamily housing project was really led by the Affordable Housing Committee. And I think I have a couple members of the Affordable Housing Committee with me, if you could just raise your hands. And we started actually back in 2015, and it's been kind of a multi-phase project. We received funding from our regional planning agency, who assisted us with phase 1, which was looking at, okay, if we're going to do multifamily zoning, what are the mechanisms that we might do, and what's the study area, that kind of thing. That was the first phase in 2015. Last year, we moved out into kind of a broader community conversation, and we received additional grant funding from Mass Housing Partnership, and we had 2 public forums, one in May to kind of broach the topic, and talk about design-related features of multifamily. And then in November, we had a meeting with a presentation about fiscal impact of multifamily housing kind of generally in Westford. I also reached out to some of the major property owners along Route 110 to get their feedback and their opinion about what would we do if we added multifamily as an allowed use along 110. And there was a kind of a mixture of response. Some were very positive. One of them, the Gutierrez Company, which is one of our major property owners along Route 110, is so enthusiastic about it that they have put forward one of the 40Bs. But other property owners, were positive. And then we have one, Paul Alphin, who represents some property owner and is a property owner along Route 110, raised some concerns. And I included that in as an attachment in the memo that was in your packet. So it wasn't kind of unanimous from property owners. And then I've been going around to different boards. I was with the school committee in December, the zoning board, the planning board, seeking feedback. Due to town meeting and elections and all sorts of other things, it took me a while to get to this board. So again, the planning board as the leader in zoning amendments is really looking to kind of get a sense from each of those boards about what they think. So this is a picture of the area that was identified in the first phase, and it's just kind of focused in on Route 110. For people like me who are used to looking at maps of the town, this looks really familiar, but just to orient you, on the right-hand side we have the Littleton line, and on the left-hand side you have on the right-hand side you have the Chelmsford line, on the left-hand side the Littleton line, so really stretching all the way across Westford's boundaries along 110 is the study area. This map also shows the different zoning districts that we have. The red color is commercial highway, the gray is industrial highway, and the pale yellow is zoned residence A. But that entire area is under consideration, is the study area.
What was that again?
So what are we talking about when we talk about multifamily zoning on Route 110? So again, we're not necessarily pursuing anything right now, but I thought I might want to try and characterize it. So looking at allowing for multifamily units, we currently, in our zoning bylaw, don't define multifamily units, and we don't allow it anywhere. There are some ways to get multifamily, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but so one thing would be just define multifamily. What is it? What are the density ranges? Where would it be allowed? That kind of thing. Again, just to give a sense, which from my perspective, what are some of the things that would be features of a multifamily district if it was along 110? Would be density much lower than what's being proposed in the 40B projects. And I'm going to talk about those briefly in a little bit. It would allow for mixed use, which is where you have a store underneath and apartments above. And it would look really carefully at places along 110. It might not be everywhere in that study area. And this is something that I got from property owners too, is there are really distinct differences along 110. It feels different, and you all know this. There are some parts where there's a real concentration of retail. There are other places where there are kind of long stretches in between activity nodes. And that was some of the feedback we got from property owners as well, in that, look carefully at where you might allow it. I know we have 2 new members, but I don't have time. But a very quick overview and review for you about zoning and how it works. Any changes to the zoning bylaw, whether it's the map or to text, takes 2/3 vote of town meeting. That's the only body that could have changed the zoning. Westford, as you can see from this, this is the zoning map of the entire town. Most of it is white, which is the Residence A district. That's 40,000 square foot lot size, roughly acre zoning. We do have the mill conversion, which applies to the only place left that has not been, where we have not had mills converted to multifamily is the 12 North Main, 10 North Main, and 69 Broadway, the core of Graniteville. But we have mill conversions with Abbott Mill and the Brookside Mill that have resulted in multifamily. And the other way that people do multifamily or higher density zoning is through something called a use variance. And that has allowed for higher density housing to occur. And one of the recent examples is now called Commodore Way. It's off of Brookside, down across from the Fletcher Club, where Frostar used to be. That's now developed with 14 houses. It's 3 acres, so that's clearly not, 1 unit per acre, which is the Residence A. So those are the ways that we currently allow for multifamily or kind of anything different than single family. Okay. I think, Andrea, if you don't mind, I'm just going to keep going and then take questions at the end.
Sure.
Okay. So I thought I'd just take a little bit of time just to brief you on what's going on with housing right now, because there is a lot going on. We're very close to the 10% threshold in our subsidized housing inventory, SHI. We're 132 units from getting that 10% of our year-round housing units. That's based on the 2010 census. So one of the things that we know is that in 2020, that denominator is going to go up. So even though we're quite close to 10%, there is certainly potentially desire or a need to maybe surpass that, to give us some buffer so that in 2021, as soon as the census becomes available, we're not vulnerable right away. We now have 3 40B applications, so we actually do not need to take any more applications, but we did have to take all 3 of those 40B applications because we hadn't yet, none of them have been approved. And so not until one of those is approved do we get over 10%. And so since those were all ongoing, that is why we had to accept those. So as you can tell, I took that same map of kind of Littleton Road and put that big red dot on it. That's where that's kind of the general area of all 3 of the 40B applications. So now I'm just going to kind of walk you through those, just to let you know what's going on. The first one we received is called Residences at Westford West. It's located behind Red Hat and NetScout. On the left-hand side here is just an aerial photo of the existing conditions showing Red Hat and NetScout. And then on the right is showing the proposed 3 apartment buildings. It was actually submitted at 282 units, and they have reduced that to 240. So this is just a little bit more of a look at those. It's currently in review at the Zoning Board of Appeals, and was the first one in the door, and will probably be the first one to be acted on by the ZBA. Okay. The second project, and those are rental apartments. And so one of the things about rental apartments is that all of those 240 units would count on the subsidized housing inventory. There's a distinction between rental housing and for sale housing when it comes to the SHI. So the next project is called 2 Robbins Road, creatively. It is being proposed by Princeton Properties, who developed the 200 units down near the Chelmsford line a couple years ago. It's on 9 acres, and they will be demolishing an existing office building. I call it the AMEC office building, or, right at the corner of Littleton Road and Robbins Road. So as you can see, it's kind of kitty corner to the place where the Residences at Westford West will be. So they'll be very close to each other. This is also a rental project. Go ahead, next. It's got 2 buildings, 2 apartment buildings, and then they have some rental townhouses. So the 2 apartment buildings are 90 units each, and so for it's a total of 180. Anyway, the townhouses are kind of ringing around the outside. I think there's 20 townhouse units total. So that's all on that one site where there's now an office building and a parking lot. Okay. The third project is called Sugar Maple Lane, which just always makes me a little bit hungry for breakfast. It is behind Old Boston Square, or behind Bell's Bistro. The address is 4 Powers Road. As you can see from this illustration of the site, it kind of wraps around. There's actually a house that is not included in it, and it kind of wraps around it. It's between 10 and 11 acres. But about half of those are wetlands and will be provided a conservation restriction or fee title to the Westford Conservation Trust is their proposal, with the 28 townhouse units being kind of snugged up right behind Old Boston Square, where there is some uplands. These are for sale townhouses. And so these will have 25% of those units to be affordable, so 7 of those will be affordable, and the remaining 21 will be just at market rate. And there's an illustration of their, it's a cul-de-sac with townhouses on either side. So those are the 3 projects that we have and that are currently, the Sugar Maple Lane will open at the next Zoning Board of Appeals meeting on May 22nd. And those other meetings are continuing also on May 22nd. So if folks are interested in tracking those projects, we have the applications on the Zoning Board of Appeals website under the name of the project. And we try and update that as much as we can. And if you have any, other, more detailed questions, contact myself or the town planner, or come to one of the ZBA meetings and ask the zoning board, and provide testimony to the zoning board. So again, just to remind you, in the 40B project review, the Zoning Board of Appeals is the sole deciding body. These are also called comprehensive permits, and that means all the permits that they need get decided at the Zoning Board of Appeals. So for example, if they need a sign permit to put up a sign, the Zoning Board of Appeals gives that sign permit. So the Planning Board really doesn't have a role in these, and that's something that's unique, and that's how the Chapter 40B Master General Laws works. And the other bodies that do still have to meet is the Conservation Commission, the Water Commission, and the Board of Health. They actually have their separate reviews and can give separate approvals. But each one of these will be having the 2 rental apartment projects will all have a wastewater treatment facility. So that's actually a state permit for that project. But the Board of Health does review that. Again, there's careful review, especially the large projects have not only the applicant's consultants providing detailed information, but we have peer reviewers that are paid for by the applicant that are doing a review on behalf of the town and making sure that the work is done in a professional manner and meets professional standards. So just in case you haven't been awake for the last 6 years, there's been a lot of development in Westford. I usually like to talk about development in Westford, whether it's commercial or residential, by pointing out that we've also protected and purchased many acres of conservation land or conservation restrictions. So it's not, just 100% development, but there have been some quite large developments. Some of them 40Bs. And some of them just by right subdivisions that have occurred, or flexible development subdivisions. And really counting Summer Village, right about 1,000 units, or just a little bit over 1,000 units. And that's since I've been here, and I've been here for just over 6 years. And that's a lot of activity that's come online. We do have the Spalding Hill Estates is a new 30-unit subdivision that's just starting planning board deliberations at their next meeting next week. And that's off of St. Augustine Road, which is off of Groton Road near Mario's. So just in closing, I wanted to provide just a snapshot about population estimates and projections. This is something that we looked at very carefully in the housing production plan. I try and stay very current on what are being projected as the town's populations. The official population projection comes from Mass DOT with input from our regional planning agency. And this shows that our 2030 population projection is 23,039. We're already beyond that as of 2015, which is an estimate from the U.S. Census Bureau. So I do communicate with our regional planning agency when these population projections come out. In this case, it was the Regional Transportation Plan. They're aware that I think that they're low, but it is a formal process that they go through with Mass DOT for transportation planning purposes. So anyway, there's a little disconnect there, but that in the official decennial census is really the official number. So anything in between that, even though it's from the U.S. Census, is still just an estimate. But this 2015 number of almost 24,000 is from the Census Bureau. So we are seeing, a population expansion faster than has been projected. And finally, I included in here a map that's from Mass Housing Partnership that I think is really interesting just for consideration. This is a map that they put together showing over the last 10 years school enrollment, whether you're increasing or declining, as well as permitted units. And so here on this map, yellow is a declining school enrollment over the last 10-year period, and we are in that declining enrollment, which much of the state is. And it is showing, I think, probably pretty accurately, our permitted units. Now, this number does include tear downs, and we do have some tear downs, so it's not just all new housing units that are coming online. So some of the, in this dot, this is kind of order of magnitude map, but, and so Westford is in that interesting perspective, which is that we have development, yet our enrollment is declining. Very interestingly, there are some communities where they're having moderate growth in their school enrollment without new housing units, which is kind of the middle of the state, a little bit to the west of us. And then there are some high growth areas inside 128 where they are having high school growth and a fair amount of development or redevelopment. So it's just an interesting map, I thought, because you might think, well, if we're having residential growth, then our school enrollment must be increasing. And in fact, over the long term, school enrollment is projected to decline in Westford. And that's part of the considerations that get taken into account, certainly in the 40B projects. So anyway, just to remind you, I'm here looking for your recommendations and thoughts and questions about the multifamily zoning project. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks. Questions, Mark?
Thanks, Chris. That was great. So I've mostly comments or input, and then maybe a question or two. So, as it relates to the 10%, going through the stuff that you presented, and given the shortfall that we currently have in affordable housing, it seems to be like we would, if all 40Bs got approved, that we would be net up around 300 more affordable housing units, given the shortfall that we currently have, which would equate to an increase in total housing of about 3,000, right? So if you take the 10% and whatever. So one of my comments or questions is whether we should wait until we understand where the 40B is actually going. I know 10% isn't the sole reason why you might want to do this, but it certainly is one of them. So that's one question and comment. A second one is related to traffic and noise, a little bit of the impact to the schools. And I noticed in some of your background material that you've had resident exposure through meetings, but it's been fairly limited in attendance. And given the population on that side of the town, the ones who are most affected, concerned that we haven't gotten nearly enough input. I know you did from the commercial side, but from residents who live and use that corridor quite often. So personally, I think we need a lot more input from that part of town, and I'm not quite sure how to best do it to get people to come out and actually. But when you start, and I'm not sure how many people are aware. So when you start thinking about a net, not a net, if you start thinking about over 400 affordable housing units that could possibly be going on in that area, and then on top of that, the possibility of having some additional housing, and for all the people who utilize that, not from a commercial side, but from a residential side, whether that might cause them some concern.
And just let me be clear that the 40B projects are actually all mixed income projects. They get counted as the rental projects all get counted on the subsidized housing inventory, but in the residences at Westford West, 25% of those will be affordable to residents at 80% and below of the area median income, and the Princeton Properties 2 Robbins Road project will 20% of those will be affordable to a little bit lower income range at 50% and below of median income. But the rest of all the units are market rate.
Yeah. So I'm concerned about not having enough input yet from that.
I hear you.
And then the last part is to the extent that we take available property and convert that to mixed use versus leaving it available for commercial, understanding the economic trade-off that we're making between those two choices. And so for all those reasons, I personally would like to wait, but that's just some input.
So But just following up on what Mark said, I mean, if we were to rezone this as mixed use, that wouldn't preclude the property from, would it be an, I guess what I'm asking is, would it be an overlay district on top of the commercial industrial, or would it be would you be rezoning it so that it would only be mixed use?
So those are great questions, and it gets really into the detail about, really quickly you get into the details of the zoning mechanisms and what do you do. I think generally, again, I can't speak for what might happen, but we would not seek to preclude commercial industrial use to continue. And zoning really is passive. Even if we rezone something to mixed use, you can't make somebody
Right.
do something. Somebody can do have the use, and that can continue until the use is abandoned for a while. And you might know there's a single-family house on Route 110, and it can continue as long as it wants to. So zoning is very passive. It doesn't make anybody, but I do think we would look to be more permissive, as Andrea is talking about, an overlay district, which, without getting into the weeds of zoning, allows for a little bit more flexibility.
But it's up to the property owner at that point in time.
It would be up to the
so-
property owner, right. And I do think whatever process, if and when this moves forward, there be a public process that would, try and get people, get input from folks, and maybe representation on a committee, whatever it is, and to get input. But I do think it's important to look very carefully at specific parts of Route 110, because it may not be appropriate for every single area on 110.
Tom?
Sort of a process question. So how might this unfold in terms of timing from here? It sounds like there's a question about whether the town would take the lead in exploring this, or whether a committee would be formed. Presumably, that would take some time to gather the information, so we might be talking about something that would come to town meeting in 18 months or 2 years? Or?
At the earliest, it would be annual town meeting next year. And really, it's the planning board kind of directs the staff in terms of what zoning bylaw amendments that we're pursuing. They have a list of priorities that I send out to all the boards and committees, or we have for the last couple of years, in July or August. Once they've had a chance to look at that. Because of staffing limitations, we have not done any of their priorities, and we do have priorities to amend different parts of the zoning bylaw for different reasons. This is on the list of the 18, but because of the master plan, affordable housing, and MPIC's actions, it kind of got moved to the top. The planning board is still looking for feedback from various boards, so really the planning board, as I see it, would be directing staff about how and if they wanted to pursue this. But yes, at the very earliest, it would be next spring.
So even at the soonest, we would have a good understanding of how the existing 40B applicants played out.
Yes,
Not
we
what the experience would be like on the ground, because they wouldn't
Yeah.
be built yet, but we would know.
You would probably, yes, by the time town meeting came along, those should be concluded. But,
Okay.
so maybe 2 years would be, if you really wanted to wait for that to play out. I don't think we'd start if people wanted to wait. We have too many other things that we could spend time on.
I see.
Elizabeth?
The concern I've heard from folks has to do with schools and first responders and making sure we know what to anticipate with that. It seems like with the proposed projects, we can say, all right, 180 units, we need X, Y, Z to serve those folks, but if we're opening up zoning, how many units could that possibly add? Are we talking about thousands of units? And that seems like a much bigger question, and what I've heard from folks is they'd like more information and understanding about the impact on that.
Yep, I think it's posted on the website, and if it's not, I'll make sure it is. We did, through the Mass Housing Partnership, had a consultant who is an expert in fiscal impact do a look at, a general look at how multifamily impacts, because there are revenues as well as expenses. School enrollment, and Tom, you know more about this than I do, again, is generally predicted to go down. It's not going to go down as much as the population as a whole, because our school population is not, it's going to be kind of steady, but there is a very natural, the baby boom echo is working its way through high school right now, and so they're soon going to be gone, and so there will be, growth in the school department, as I understand it, is not necessarily horrible. There's a lot of marginal costs that have to happen. The administration and the janitors and the, lights on in the school, all has to happen. The public safety is definitely has been a concern and has been raised loudly by this public safety staff. The budget process, I mean, these are going to be incremental costs, whether it's, developed as zoned. Some of these sites could be redeveloped or developed with office buildings, retail, and those also affect public safety. And so in some sense, the allocation of dollars and the priorities of dollars as a budgeting priority is one way to kind of look at that. Not that there's a great solution for that, as Jody would remind me, as we look at our very tight budget, but that's one way to think about it, is that there's, there can be development or redevelopment of this corridor that will also affect public safety.
So, I mean, the very fact we've got commercial developers asking to build 40Bs tells me that the professional developers know there's no market for commercial development for 5 or 10 years. So that's, that the trade-off of residential versus non-res probably isn't there for about a decade, but of course zoning lasts forever. In general, I think multi-use makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we built most of our villages back in the day, if you think about it. Limits traffic, it's more friendly, it's the way increasingly we want zoning to be. It does raise a couple of questions. One is, if you're currently a homeowner along Route 110, and you're used to seeing something that's about, 1 story, maybe 2, and we build things that are 4, that changes the character. So I agree with Mark, we want to, I think, talk to the local residents more than we perhaps have about what this would look like visually. Secondly, what's it do for traffic? Because if you've thought through a commercial development where people drive in between 8 and 9 a.m. and leave between 5 and 6 p.m., that's one flow. If you take that to homeowners, you have perhaps earlier departures, later arrivals. I mean, it may actually be a positive in terms of spreading out traffic, but we don't know that. Maybe we'll learn that from the 40B's
Yeah.
traffic studies, but.
You've captured it. That's exactly what it is it's more spread out.
And then, I guess, what is the multiplier impact? So if we build a lot more housing, there's a knock-on effect, right, for retail, for healthcare, for whatever. So if I'm sure others have done some work saying if you build an extra 100 units of multifamily, what does that drive for other development down the road, and does that itself create?
Like spin-off.
Yeah, I mean, you think about when you build housing development, what comes in next? Well, the corner bank and the dock in the box and so forth. So that presumably comes.
The what?
Dock in the box, medical healthcare offices,
Dock in.
Dock in the box, right.
Duck in.
medical office
Yeah, I
buildings.
get you.
So I was kind of curious if we could sort of take a look at what that might mean in terms of, because rather than zoning it all multifamily, we may want to think about what does it mean for pockets of retail that develop around it.
Yeah, and when I talked about really looking carefully, I think there are some areas that are better served by, even if we did mixed use required, and that might be a very slow uptake, but there may be some property owners that have 2-story. What I've heard from some of the retail property owners that have a second story that's office, they're really having trouble renting those second stories, and if they could do one more story, so getting to your height, and have those be apartments, that might be something that would work in the market, they think, and that may be fairly limited. And I do just want to make a distinction between, it's not just commercial, because we
Right,
have
right,
office, the office market is very slow and has been very slow for the last 10 years in the suburban market. Commercial retail in Westford anyway has been relatively strong. We've had new developments, we've had redevelopment of the Market Basket into Whole Foods. And we have Cornerstone Square, obviously, with almost 240,000 square feet, primarily retail. So there's some different types of, like, the economy is strong in some areas and not so strong in other areas.
But I think it's a good idea. I think we maybe take it a little bit, take it slow, maybe do a few plots as opposed to doing it in a big way.
Thank you. I think I have a sense of.
Well, actually,
oh,
before you
oops.
go, since, does anybody in the audience have any comments? Okay.
So I have a sense of the board. Thank you. I'll report it back to the planning board.
Okay.
Thanks very much for your
Thanks,
time.
Chris.
Thank you. Okay, I need a motion to open the public hearing to approve a transfer of a Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 138, Section 15, all alcohol package store license from Busa Wine and Spirits of Westford, Inc. to Pro Wine, Inc., doing business as Julio's Liquors at 160 Littleton Road.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second, I thought that was moved to.
We have to open the.
Okay.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. They're not here tonight. We need to continue this public hearing. Patty, are they coming on the 23rd?
Yes.
Okay, we need to continue it to a time certain. So what time would we like to put this on?
7:35?
Okay. So with that, we are. No, we have to keep it open. But this public hearing is going to be continued until May 23rd at 7:35 PM here in the Town Hall Meeting Room at 55 Main Street. Okay. All right, we're at our next item, which is a public hearing, but is Paul Starrett around? Okay, I am going to exercise the chair's discretion, and before we open your public hearing, which is going to take a significant amount of time, since Paul is here simply for one item, and we'd like to get him home somewhat early tonight. We're going to take the request to sign the order of taking to secure.
There's no Bruins game tonight.
No.
No, there isn't, but.
Ottawa Senators.
Please.
Let's take the request to sign the order of taking to secure easements for the Oak Hill Road and Groton Road intersection project out of order. So Paul, if you could, I know three of us know what this is, but if you could just briefly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Paul Starrett, Town Engineer.
Everybody.
This gives us permission to take easements on various properties. Town meeting gave you that authority and then gave you funds for it in 2 consecutive annual town meetings. And then it allows us to spend $2.8 million of Mass DOT's money, well, our money that Mass DOT is giving back to us, on the intersection improvement project at Oak Hill and Groton Road, where we'll be installing a signal.
Okay. Questions? Mark?
So just one. So I know at the annual town meeting, we allocated 200,000, yep? And the sum of the stuff that's, that you're requesting is about 130,000?
Correct.
So, and I know that those funds were both for the takings as well as redoing some landscaping. So is the balance of the 70 or some amount within it what you're planning on using for?
Yes, and
that?
hopefully even more. I should point out that we've had 2 donations, one significant from the Lowell 5-cent Savings Bank, and Jody can help me, I think it was in the order of 28,000.
I thought it was more than that.
Yeah, it was more than that.
Because
It
I
was
think
not a
we already
small
had
sum.
you accept it, I believe it,
It's a,
like 40,000.
Yeah, exactly, just as an act of
Nice.
good citizenship, and also Ace Hardware did the same thing. They just made a donation of their easement rights. They, the bank, of course, recognizes that we're installing a traffic signal at the property and putting in sidewalk pedestrian accommodations, so there's a huge benefit to them. But just to note their generosity.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
No
Okay.
questions.
Is there a motion to approve? Oh, is there? Oh. A motion that the board vote to sign the Oak Hill Road and Groton Road order of taking is authorized by the 2017 Annual Town Meeting, Article 24, and as prepared by Town Council.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
You're the clerk.
Patty does that for you to sign, so we can record it tomorrow.
Okay.
Because I don't know how to do the rest of it.
All right, now, going back to our 7:55 PM item, which is a public hearing. And I need a motion to open the public hearing on a request from 540 Groton Road LLC to approve Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 148, Section 13, license application at 540 Groton Road for 2 30,000-gallon liquid asphalt tanks and 1 10,000-gallon number 2 fuel oil tank.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Good evening, Madam Chair, member of the board, Douglas DeShane, representing 540 Groton Road LLC. With me, Rick DeFelice, manager of 540 Groton Road. As was said, We're here seeking your signature on a tank license, which is a pretty straightforward licensing process in the town of Westford. Anyone proposing to have underground or above ground, as is our case, storage tanks need to obtain a license from the Board of Selectmen. The tank license itself is actually a first step to applying through the Board of Health for a hazardous materials storage permit, so that, well, I suppose if we weren't storing number 2 fuel oil or liquid asphalt, if we were storing water, we wouldn't need a Board of Health permit. But in our case, and in the case of most storage tanks, gasoline storage tanks, oil company storage tanks, any kind of storage tanks that will ultimately hold material that is deemed hazardous, you do need the license. And then from that license, we then applied to the Board of Health for a hazardous materials storage permit, which is a more extensive permit, which actually regulates what you put in the tank and how you store them. But this, again, is the first step, which is just focused on the tanks themselves. It's my understanding that the purpose of the tank license is to be sure that the tanks are in fact UL-regulated, UL-approved tanks, that the tanks you're proposing to use physically are the correct tanks. So we have submitted all of the tank information, all the materials information, the site information with our application, which I understand was then forwarded to the fire department for review, and now we're back here for the board to issue the license itself.
So my understanding also, though, is besides needing a Board of Health hazardous materials storage permit, our fire department has to issue a permit, and then also the state fire marshal has to approve and issue a permit for the storage of these materials.
It is my understanding that the state fire marshal oversees the installation and construction of the tanks themselves, yes.
Okay.
And we've actually received previously a special permit, a water resource protection special permit for these tanks, because it was at least initially understood that the tanks were in a water resource protection overlay district. And so we went through the process of obtaining that special permit, which we have. That was an over a 1-year process, whereby not only the tanks themselves, but the containment structure, the stormwater management system, the safety system associated with the tanks and the delivery system to the plant, the fire system, everything to do with the storage and of these materials and the tanks themselves. We spent well over a year with the planning board obtaining the permits for that. That entailed bringing in fire safety experts to do an analysis and report on the proposed tanks and the storage and the containment and the treatment and everything else. The fire department obviously was significantly involved. We had tank companies, we had materials companies. It was a year-long process where this was scrutinized and reviewed, and we have obtained that permit. But stepping back, we're here just for a tank license.
Okay, I think before we have questions, I think probably all of us want to hear from our fire department. So, Chief Targ, Lieutenant Parsons, I don't know, flip a coin, but one of you.
Lieutenant Parsons, Westford Fire Prevention. Any direct questions I can help you with? The Westford Fire Department, along with the chief and the deputy chief, we've reviewed this project right from the beginning, and we will continue with the process as it goes through. And naturally, as already stated, that it has to go through the State Fire Marshal's office. We had quite a few meetings with the client and making sure that the fire department received very specific safety items that will aid us in the event if there was an issue. and they have been able to meet those requirements.
Could you just, for the public and for us, just tell us what those safety requirements
Sure.
are?
First off, they have to put in what is called a cistern, 60,000 gallons cisterns in there, which is our water source in the event of a fire there. That was calculated out by a fire protection engineer. Also, they will be providing a foam unit that would aid us in the assistance of if we had a fire there. So those are the two major items that are required as providing the safety of these tanks.
Okay. Okay, with that, questions from the board before, and I know you folks are here with questions and comments, and I will get to you, but questions from the board first. Mark?
So, you wrote a letter asking us that you would recommend as, in this license application, that we make sure that it includes the cisterns as well as manual shut-off valves
That is correct.
on the number 2 oil tank and the liquid asphalt tanks?
Yes,
So-
part of that came from a conversation with the State Fire Marshal's office. So, again, we use them for great assistance into making sure that anything of this size is gonna meet the safety requirements. So, they provided us that information, so we would like to make sure that it's part of the license.
Okay.
So that it upholds and make sure that, you know, we're keeping things safe.
All right, so we need to make sure that that's included. And then lastly, just for information purposes, the certificate that gets filed annually or registered annually for the having of these, does that require annual inspections as well?
Oh, yeah, they will have to get an inspection done on a regular basis, and that's part of the permit. Once they have their license, and then the tanks are, go through the full process, and let's say, it's underway, because of that permit, it will require the fire department to go out there on a regular basis and to do periodic inspections all the time.
I guess just one last follow-up to that then. So under the worst-case scenario that one of those inspections, it fails, the system fails, can you just walk through what happens? Is there an immediate shutdown of the plant if something like that were to happen? Do they have a certain number of days to rectify before they have to shut down? What's the...
It would depend upon the violation, if there was a violation, and, naturally, I would suspect in our process that it's something of this size and nature that we would automatically ask for assistance from the State Fire Marshal's office.
Okay.
And they would help work us through that situation.
Okay, thank you.
And just, I'm going to follow up on my questions. The certificates that, that get issued, or actually, let me take a step back. If this board issues a license, and I don't know the answer to this, does that license get filed, where does that license get filed?
With the town clerk's office.
Okay, is it filed with the Registry of Deeds at all, or does it simply just stay in the town clerk's office?
I'm not positive to that answer, but I believe it's with the town clerk's office.
And then are there certificates also filed annually at the town clerk's office, or with you?
Yeah, no,
Both.
they would be annually with the town clerk's office as well.
Okay, thanks. Other questions for
Sure, I
Scott?
think fairly quick. So annual inspections, is that done by Westford Fire or by the State Fire Marshal?
It'll actually be most likely both, but it comes under the jurisdiction of the Westford Fire Department first. But typically, the State Fire Marshal's office has what they call code compliance officers, and they will come out and assist us.
And secondly, during construction, I presume there's various decision points to sign off on this has been done, that's been done, the cisterns, the valves. Is that the Fire Marshal's office that does that, or is it
That'll
a
be under the
joint?
direction of the Westford Fire Department, and we'll use the marshal's office in conjunction with that construction.
Okay, and I guess final question, I wasn't a little confused now, is there also a license required from the Fire Marshal's office, or is it just a matter of oversight of?
No, they just oversee the construction, making sure that it is constructed correctly, and then they will help us with compliance once it's put in place.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions from you guys? Tom?
This may be for you, it may also be for you, Jody. I just want to make sure I've got a complete picture of who's responsible for what in terms of safe installation and then ongoing compliance. So I think I understand that the State Fire Marshal's office with you are there to make sure it's installed correctly.
That's
And
correct.
then as a team, you're going back on some basis to inspect. Are there other town agencies or other responsibilities from the zoning board, just as regards this tank? Or is that the extent of the full sort of oversight compliance regime?
Unless there were Board of Health concerns, I don't believe so.
Okay.
And, yeah, and the Board of Health concerns would be with respect to the materials that are actually stored in the tank itself, but I don't think the Board of Health has oversight over the construction of the tanks
So
themselves.
the three bodies are State Fire Marshal, Westford Fire, and the Board of Health as it relates to the materials in the tank.
Were you going to respond to
Well,
that?
I was going to say that I do agree that the Board of Health does not have a role in the construction or the oversight of the construction. But the Board of Health does issue a hazardous materials storage permit,
Right.
which entails everything: the tanks, the
Okay.
secondary containment structure, the stormwater protection systems, the shutoffs. So their permit really oversees everything to do with the storage.
Okay,
So, and your planning board has authority over the the water resource protection special permit, which entails the entire system, including the tanks, containment, safety, shutoffs, fire, all of that. So, and then last but not least, your building inspector has authority over not only the construction, but the ongoing existence of the structure itself. So there is oversight at many levels.
Yeah, and just for edification, if I can, one of the things we've talked about in the past that we absolutely have to continue to make a priority is the coordination amongst all the boards and the departments that support those
Right.
boards, and making sure that all these opportunities and capabilities that we have are actually done in in some coordinated manner and communicated back to the various boards.
And also the public, I think it would be useful if there was some transparency so everyone can just see what's being measured and that's being done carefully.
Nothing but transparency under this board, despite common belief.
okay. Anything else for the board before I open it up to the public? Okay. Questions or comments from the public? And I know you guys all know the routine. You know you have to come to the mic and tell us who you are and where you live.
Hi, Kim Miner, 9 Tenny Road. I just had a question about the foam. Is that a spray foam or is that like a container foam?
Where's
You said foam
Lieutenant
for the-
Parsons? Don't go far, or somebody, or okay.
Behind you.
Could you answer that, please?
Yeah, it's a special foam that actually works through a applicator where it actually will make what we call a blanket, and it smothers the fire and it helps to put it out. I mean, that's probably the simplest terms that I can put it in for you. But it's a foam that almost looks like soap in the long run.
Fire extinguisher kind of?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so my one question with that is that a chemical, the foam? Curious.
Again, somebody, I don't know, somebody from the fire department needs to answer that for us.
Lieutenant Fletcher from the fire department. I'm a member of the hazardous material team. It's more like a soap type of agent that creates the foam. It's water-based. It's aerated. We can set it at different percentages to whether we want a thicker foam or a wetter foam. We can go from like 3% to like 6%, and it gives us a better, depending on what we need to do. We can make the concentration heavier or wetter, so it takes care of the thing. Also, if there were a problem, there are, I believe, 15 different, throughout the state, there's 15 foam trailers that we can call upon also to at least bring us more foam if we don't have enough foam on site. And that would have to be replenished by the responsible party for
My guess is that what your real question is, is
That's the first I've heard of the foam, so my first thought is, what's in the foam, if it needed to be used, where is that foam then going?
Right, and
Is the
is
Board
it
of
going
Health
into the
involved in
ground?
that
Is it going into
foam
the groundwater?
decision,
Yeah.
and is there an MSDS sheet on the foam?
Yes.
How's it gonna affect us? There's wetlands, you said that you got a permit for the, wear pod. You know, was the foam part of that? Because I wasn't aware of the foam, I've never seen anything about the like what's in the foam, the chemicals in the foam. So that's just my first thought about, and that foam's being stored on site, sounds like?
Yes, it is being, right, Lieutenant?
Yes, that would be correct.
Chief is going to come and help us
I
out.
can say that we currently use foam. We have Class A and Class B foam that we currently use in town. Most of our brush fires we fight because it gets deep into the ground. We have to use foam to get to the roots and beyond the layers of leaves and everything else to extinguish the fire in the ground. So it's nothing new. It's nothing new that we've used. Years ago we used to, before they had foam, we used to use Dawn dish detergent, and it would work in tight budget times in the tank.
That would be now.
We normally buy a pallet of foam a year. Is usually what we go through on our own with us.
That's right, question.
Wait, hang on 1 minute, Scott.
Is there a shelf life to that foam?
5 years, I believe.
So someone will actually then monitor the plant, make sure we keep it fresh. Okay. Is that your fire department's job, I presume? It's part of the inspections?
Yes, that'll be part of the inspection process to make sure that everything is, compliant and meet, we don't have foam that's expired.
So just a follow-on question then. So because I think where the resident is trying to go with this is, so the MSDS sheet, does the Board of Health get involved with understanding what's in that foam and have input, not to its firefighting capability, but to its implications on the environment as well as any of the residents and where that might end up at some point in time?
Especially in the water resource, that overlay district, you have now another chemical separate from what's going to be in the tanks. This is just baseline beforehand.
So that's the question.
That's my kind of
Do we know,
concern.
does the Board of Health?
I'm not sure about the Board of Health. I know that if there were such an incident where we were using foam to be fighting a fire, DEP would also be called to be on the scene to assist in the monitoring of groundwater and stuff like that.
Doug?
I mean, we can certainly find that out. I would be surprised if this foam is hazardous because we use it for, we use it for brush fires all the time, but we can certainly get you the MSDS on that.
Okay. Yeah, I just feel like we're adding chemical after chemical.
What was your name?
Kim Liner, 9 Tenny Road. I know it's standard. It's just a question I have.
I just want to make sure, based on the input that you've gotten, we're not adding chemicals. This is
No, I
already a
wasn't
chemical.
aware when I.
Okay, to the information that you've got. I got you.
Yeah. My second question was, all these inspections that go on every year, is that something that's paid for by the company, or is that a town paid for? Do we pay for their hours through our taxes, or is that, how do they get paid for those every year inspections?
It's paid for the taxes. It's the normal inspection. We inspect schools quarterly. Most businesses, they see us walking through. It's just another business in town that we inspect. It'll be on a regular schedule for inspection, just like any new company coming in town, any business or daycare facility or anything like that.
Doug, did you want to say something? And then I'll get you, ma'am.
Just 30 seconds on the foam truck. Maybe it's important for especially your new members to understand. When we were going through the process of the Water Resource Protection Special Permit in order to have these tanks, and that's when we went through a significant analysis by independent fire safety companies, the fire department, and a number of other experts. One of the things that was we spent a significant amount of time was safety, and if there is an accident or an incident or a fire or a spill. And so we had to design containment and stormwater management to protect the environment. It was actually a recommendation of the fire department that perhaps in order to provide better safety and firefighting capacity that the town at the time did not have a foam truck. And it was suggested that perhaps we could supply one to ensure additional safety on the site. And so that was actually an offer made by Mr. DeFelice in conjunction with the fire department's recommendations that we would provide a foam truck on the site, but that foam truck would be made available for the fire department year-round to fight any other fire in town in which they needed the equipment. So this foam truck isn't necessarily something that is unique or required specifically because of what we're doing, but rather what came to light in the bigger picture of how are we going to be safe, how are we going to be able to deal with any incidents should they occur. So the fire truck was a recommendation of working in conjunction with the fire department. So the nature of the foam itself, quite frankly, is not our doing, nor something we've recommended. I understand that this foam is the standard material used by firefighters throughout the state. The other thing I want to make clear is that this license and these particular tanks and the materials that we're proposing to store in them are not unique or different to this project or this plant. You require tank licenses of gas stations, our home heating companies. These tanks are exactly the same kinds of tanks those hold. And if you look at the materials we're proposing to hold in them, one of them is number 2 fuel oil, the same fuel oil we all have in our homes if you have oil. The other material is liquid asphalt, which in many ways is less hazardous than number 2 fuel oil. It's very thick. It has to be heated in order to move it. If it spills, the minute it hits the ground and it hits the air, it's like lava. It slowly hardens, and it doesn't, unlike number 2 fuel oil, which is a thin liquid that when it falls into the ground, it dissipates into the dirt. This stuff is sort of lava is probably the best thing. So you have less concern about that material should it spill because it won't go into the ground, it won't go into the groundwater. So the materials we're proposing are no different or more hazardous than the standard stuff we see in home heating fuel tanks, Healy oil, cook oil, to name a couple, and less hazardous than gasoline tanks. So the foam truck is, again, I'll just finish up, is not unique. It was something offered by my client for the department to have and use throughout the town, not just here.
Ma'am?
Liz Denley, 458 Groton Road. I just want to clarify, because I happened to spend all day today at the Westford Regency on a seminar on a new contaminant called polyfluoroalkyl substances, which comes from firefighting foam. So there is potential for, a new contaminant to be released into the ground if the foam, God forbid, has to be used. I just don't want people to think it's contaminant-free. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hang on a minute. I need to ask if there are other folks, because you've spoken. So other comments or questions from the audience?
Barbara Herbs, 11 Tower Road. My concern is you've got this big tank and you've got, is it a liquid asphalt?
Yes.
Okay.
Ma'am, if you address your questions to the board, then we can get them to the right people.
Okay. So it's a liquid, but he said it had to be heated. Does this tank, is it heated so that this stuff, because otherwise it's going to turn into concrete in this tank. I'm not sure how you're getting it out of the tank.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you're pumping it out, how much room for spillage? And I know he says it doesn't move much, but there must be some amount of spillage because there is when you pour anything. And also, what kind of a smell are we going to get?
Okay. Doug, do you want to
Sure.
answer those questions?
It is a liquid asphalt. It is heated in order to move it into the manufacturing process. So it is heated so that it will move sufficiently to be injected into the manufacturing process. It is an entirely closed system. There are no leaks, there's no spilling, it's entirely closed, and in fact, part of the safety requirements and the inspection requirements are that all the safety valves, the shutoffs, there's alarms. If there's a leak, an alarm will go off. There's a very complicated safety structure associated with this whole thing. But they're not open tanks. There should be no spills, and because they're completely contained, there should be no odors. The same as any fuel oil tank in your home. You have a tank with number 2 fuel oil. That system doesn't leak. It shouldn't leak. It should be enclosed. There's no smell. This is the same thing at a larger scale and outdoors.
Okay. I have oil tank in my basement. I can smell oil, and it's a brand new system. So I know that there is some smell from, I don't know if you're going to heat this stuff. There's got to be some smell somewhere. If you're telling me that this is going to be completely odorless, I find it hard to believe.
I would suggest you call your
Okay.
heating company. You shouldn't have smells in your home.
Absolutely.
Well, I can smell it coming out of the pipes, but
Thank you, ma'am. Lisa? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, my name is Shen He Xiong, number 13 Villanova Drive. I have 2 questions. First, is the tank design checked? And
Is the tank what? I'm sorry, I missed what you said.
It's the tank checked and certified by professional organization about its reliability. And that's
Well, we, as part of this application, we had to submit all of the specs for the tanks themselves, and my understanding is they are UL-approved tanks, and the state fire marshal will oversee the construction of those tanks and certify that they've been constructed correctly and they're the correct tanks before we're allowed to use them. So the answer to the question is yes.
Yes, so I mean, before it is constructed, the design itself has to be checked and certified by some organization, right?
Yes, they are a tank that you purchase that have been UL certified. I believe that's the National Certifying Agency, UL certifications.
Right.
And that's what the fire department requires and the state marshal requires, that you use the tanks that have been certified.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you. So my second question is, how do you contain the asphalt, the liquid asphalt? I mean, could you explain the containment plan, including the regular operation, say loading, unloading, and in case of accident, how do you contain the asphalt, the liquid asphalt? I mean, it has to be within the design. Could you explain that?
We are, well, in terms of the filling of the tanks, they are filled the same, they are filled by truck. A big truck comes in, and the same way a gas station receives its oil, or a home heating company receives its oils. It's pumped from a truck. There's a valve, you put it on, and it's pumped in. All of that system, as I understand it, has safety features and alarm systems to make sure there's no spills. Once the material is in the tank, it is a pump system that will push the material, heat it, and push it through pipes, which are alarmed and have shutoffs and safety features, which have been extensively reviewed and approved. In terms of containment, we are required, these tanks will sit in a concrete containment structure. I guess the easiest way to describe it is a bathtub, concrete bathtub, and a moat. And there's a moat and a concrete system that is required, I believe, to hold 1.5 times, or it's some factor above. So if you have 30,000 gallons, your containment system has to be larger than 30,000 gallons. And these tanks have been designed to sit in a tank farm that has containment, concrete containment exceeding the requirements. So if there's a spill at the tank or the valves or anything, it's caught in this concrete bathtub. If through something happens that any of that material leaves the containment structure itself, we expect that the liquid asphalt's not going to go far. But the fuel oil is more, more of a liquid state, such that it will travel, it'll flow, it'll seep. So we've actually designed, there's a moat system around the containment system that will pick up any of this material that's on the surface or starting to go into the ground. And that is all tied into the stormwater management control system, and it will take it to a reservoir where we have shutoffs so that we can contain it. So there's 3 series of containments to prevent any liquid from getting into the environment. But in theory, it shouldn't go any farther than the concrete containment because it's designed to be larger than the total volume of the tanks. But there is secondary and a 3rd layer of protection, which has been reviewed and approved by the engineering department and the fire department.
So you have 1 tank or 2 tanks?
3 tanks.
3 tanks, 1 for the fuel, 1 for the liquid asphalt, and
2 for the liquid asphalt, 1
2 for liquid asphalt. So do they share the same concrete containment?
Yes.
So if some accident happens, or the fuel or the liquid asphalt discharged to the concrete structure, then what are you going to do with the fuels in the concrete structure?
There is a, we are required to have a complete safety procedure and training for all on-site personnel. We have a safety procedure. There are certain steps we have to follow if there's an issue of any kind, including, I'm sure, reporting right away to the fire department and the Conservation Commission and everyone else. I mean, it's a standard protocol for any fuel oil tank that's in this town. So I would, and again, I'm just speaking from sort of my understanding, is that if there was a leak and it was in the containment center, you'd have to bring a pumper truck in to pump it out of the concrete bathtub containment into a truck to be transported. And it would be treated as any other spill or leak that machinery has.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Lisa Nakash in Holzberg, Betty Lane. Is this going to be the biggest tank we've got in this town? Do we have any that are as big as this, 30,000 gallons?
I don't know, I'll ask the gentleman standing behind you.
The largest one recently was the LNG tank.
Wait, Chief, can you just come to the mic?
The satellite plant, LNG satellite plant, which was just decommissioned last year or a year or two on 110, was the largest tank we had. That was liquid natural gas.
How big was that?
How big was it?
Was it 100,000?
Yeah, 100,000.
And it was decommissioned, though.
Yeah.
Oh. And that was a utility company, right? So they kind of trump all of our local zoning, don't they?
No.
No?
Not that I know of. They may
Right.
try to,
They still have a
but.
license.
Okay, yeah. So there's a railroad track between me and the major fire department, right? Not the NAB one. If there were a major accident there, what happens? How do you get fire personnel there? And if the railroad track was busy, like it often is when I'm trying to get to these meetings and I can't get past the railroad tracks. That's what I was trying to ask. What happens when the railroad tracks are impeding traffic?
First, if we were ever blocked like that, we would call mutual aid. We'd seek an alternate route around.
Okay, and so going to the issue of mutual aid, I'm reading from the 40A appeal that the town of Chelmsford filed on the major commercial project permit that was granted by this town. And it states here, Chelmsford and Westford have a mutual aid agreement that requires Chelmsford to provide support as needed pursuant to the District 6 Fire Chiefs Association Mutual Aid Agreement for Joint Fire, Rescue, and Ambulance Services dated July 1st, 2008. Further says the town of Chelmsford was not contacted regarding the additional training necessary to safely engage in the uniquely dangerous firefighting activity that may be necessary on the property as a result of the highly toxic and flammable materials necessary for the operation of an asphalt plant. So while I appreciate Attorney DeShane is making this sound like it's just something that's going to fall into a bathtub and it's going to solidify and it's going to be all great, these are experts. These are your peers, right? And they're saying that we never really reached out to them. And so as a resident who would probably feel the explosion if this thing goes off, just like it once did in Chelmsford, okay? Chelmsford, I think, has some experience in this matter. They've had to deal with an explosion of this sort that these things could be involved in. Just the fact that we're asking for a foam cart on this property is an admission by this town that this is a dangerous industrial operation. Just the fact that I'm listening to an attorney tell me, oh, it's just soap or whatever, but then we've got to happen to have an expert in the room. Sorry, I don't know who it was, but we happen to have an expert in the room who just...
expert, I think, said it.
Yeah, but I think we just heard from another expert who said, yeah, if the stuff is used, there are chemicals that are going to be hitting our groundwater. I'm concerned about our earth, air, and water around here. I'm concerned about our kids that are not too far from that site. So I'm asking you, before you grant this, before you even consider granting this, please, would you just stop for a minute and do the due diligence? Could our fire chief speak with Chelmsford's fire chief and make sure that everybody's comfortable first? Because if we're relying on mutual aid, and I think we are, I don't know how many times I've been stuck at that railroad track. I don't want to be on the other side of it with black smoke going up in the air and kids having to breathe it in the daycare center next door or the school next door without anybody being able to get to it in time. And so I don't feel comfortable if Chelmsford is being relied on to help. And this is legal stuff. This is real. They said it. I'm not saying it. I'm reading what they said. Okay? I'm asking you to please do your due diligence first. Let's have the towns talk to each other and make sure that they feel comfortable before issuing this kind of a license. I think it would be the responsible thing to do. Thank you.
Chief Todd. Chelmsford does have an active plant right now. I'm not sure how they respond to it. We have a foam trailer in the air. I'm not sure where the other closest one is. I'm not sure what their situation is, if they've had any issues down there at their plant. And our mutual aid agreement is just not with Chelmsford, it's with basically every town in the state. District 6 has an agreement between the towns, which are 18 towns that were around, but we also have, you signed an agreement several years ago where we have an agreement through fire departments throughout the state. That is a reciprocal agreement.
Chief, haven't you talked to the fire chief about this recently?
I talked to him quickly as he was getting on a plane to go for a conference in Washington, and he didn't really express anything that he was, he said he had not seen the plans on it, and we had not time to discuss it. We do have a meeting coming up where we'll probably sit down and talk about it, but we haven't sat and had a lengthy conversation about it yet. We normally on this, like if we're installing a gas station, which would be about 40,000 gallons,
40 to 60.
Which would be a flammable, not combustible. We don't usually go to another town to seek, approval or anything like that. But where this is on the line and everything else, we can certainly have a conversation with him about that.
Yeah.
I'm Mary Gordon at 3 Links Road in Nabnasset, and I can walk to the facility, so I'm very nearby. And I have concerns about worst case happening, that this thing explodes, how that is going to impact. I think we have to look at worst case, because saying, you can put precautions in, but until you look at worst case, then it happens, and I'm the one that's going to be in the direct line of fire. And I have real concerns about this. I see your hand over there.
Yeah, just raising it for Andrew to see so I can...
I've also sat at the railroad crossings for up to 40 minutes while some of the freight trains go by. So the traffic doesn't move seamlessly when those trains are running. I have to go through the Oak Hill Road and Route 40 crossing every day. So the traffic and all that, I have to deal with that. And I'm just concerned that I saw how this was pushed through, even though we all voted against it. And as a citizen, you know, I asked myself, how could that have happened? And I'm standing here and I'm hearing that there are these, you know, huge tanks of hazardous materials that have to be, you know, oversight from the town health department. So clearly, yeah, we're talking about hazardous materials. I lived there. You know, if there's smoke that comes off into the air because the closed system doesn't work, it fails at some point, or there's human error. And human error often causes a lot of failure, as we know, in these type of things. Then I'm the one who's going to suffer. I'm the one that's going to be inhaling that stuff. So,
Okay. Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, so a couple things. First of all, we're talking about the tanks tonight, right? I mean, we're talking about a license for the tanks, so I'd like to make sure that that's what we're talking about tonight, nothing more. Secondly, all the gas stations in town, all the other major commercial properties that have these large tanks are all over town. While this may be 2 of the 3 may be a slightly different material, it's the same thing we allow to happen all over town. As a matter of fact, the rapid refill, I don't know what size those underground gas tanks are, but they're not insignificant. So anyway, I know there's concerns overall, but I'd like us to just stay focused on the agenda item, which is the tanks.
Yes, sir.
Sitaram Vangala, 10 Briarwood Drive. I understand that these tanks would contain hazardous materials, and we also need the approval of the Board of Health.
Yes.
So my question is, are you coordinating with the Board of Health? Because it cannot be like piecemeal. It's Board of Health and whatever other boards are there, and eventually together all the boards decide and give the permit. I got the feeling that it is piecemeal. This is for the license, then Board of Health will give something. So my question is,
It's a process, so I know it feels piecemeal, but they have to come for a license first, and then from here they go to the Board of Health to get the permit for the storage of the hazardous waste materials.
but are you coordinating, is this board coordinating with the Board of Health?
I guess,
Not sure what that means.
I don't know what you mean by you saying
But-
coordinating with, that's what I'm having trouble
Means
with.
I think both the boards have to work in tandem.
Well, this
It's not
board
just
doesn't
the-
have any, this board has no authority over the permit that the Board of Health issues for storage of hazardous waste materials. That's their purview, and we don't tell them what to do, and we can't sit and tell them what to do. So that, they do that, I mean, their
They're an
decision.
elected board.
Yeah, they're an elected board, they do that, that's their decision. We can't tell them what to do. If they, whatever their decision is, we abide, we will follow it, because it's like, just as we are an elected board, they are an elected board, and so we follow what their decision is.
Okay, I learned something. So both are at the same level, so you cannot override the Board of Health's decision.
That would be correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
My name is Ann Ken from Briarwood Drive. First of all, I'm concerned about the tank because it's big. The material is hazardous. But I also like to, because I keep hearing it's nothing but it's like a gasoline tank, and we have a gas station all over the place in the town, so we shouldn't be too worried about that. Now, my question is, I heard this tank requires permit from Board of Selectmen, Board of Health, and also need some permit from the state. Okay. Now, my question is, if somebody wants to open a gas station in town, do they need the same permit from Selectmen, from Health, and from state?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, the Board of Health wrote the policy on
Right.
storage tanks. That's why we have that bylaw in town, is because of the Board of Health.
Okay, and so the states also needs to be involved. Okay, so that clarified that. The second thing is, I do understand that because that is the asphalt plant actually is very, very close to the Chelmsford town, and I also understand from Elisa's point that the two sides of the town needs to help each other out, especially when that industrial site is so close to the Chelmsford, actually closer to the Chelmsford Fire Department than to the Westford Fire Department. So I really wanted to make sure when you guys have any training for the fire department employees and any regulations, anything, North Chelmsford needs to be equally involved, because I feel like my property, is equally depending on both Chelmsford side and the Westford side, because it's so close to Chelmsford. So I really appreciate Alicia's point that we needed to get sign on. We need to get Chelmsford Fire Department to sign on this, whatever needs to be signed on. They need to feel comfortable and committed to this part of the job.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
Hui Huang, Nanwing Road.
I'm sorry, I missed you.
Hui Huang, Nanwing Road. So my question is, so is this 60,000 tons, or is it?
230,000
Two
gallon tanks.
30,000 gallons and one 10,000?
Correct. So is it 10,000 for the gas?
Heating
The
oil,
fuel?
heating
The
oil.
heating
Heating
oil,
oil.
okay. Well, this is not a, somebody's, heating oil tank in somebody's basement, right? It's
Right,
very big.
we know.
So my question is, do the plant actually, Newport Materials, do they really need such a big tank? Anybody say they need a 10,000? Any justifications there?
All of that went through the planning department and the permitting through the planning department, and so it is, it comes here as having been permitted for that. And I would expect and suspect that when they made their presentation to the planning department, they justified why they needed the size of the tanks that they have.
I don't know. Yeah. So the second question is that, does the town have the authority to, periodically inspect, the safety of the tanks and the plant, so that what if somebody say, oh, today I smell like gas from that tank, for example, a neighbor or somebody driving by, and they smell something strange, does the town, can the town go in there and then?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
So is that written, or is that
Yes.
agreed by the new?
It's not written? Isn't it?
Is that written
There's
somewhere?
a written response that anytime there's a suspected hazard, we're not deemed trespassing on the property, we're automatically
Right.
on the property to check it out.
Right. So if you drove by, sir, and you smelled something, you could call the fire department.
Okay.
And report it, and they would go out and inspect and see what was going on.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
If I could, I just
Yes.
want- in the basic term of a license in this form, it's for using the land for the storage of, allowing them to store something other than water in that tank, because it's over 10,000 gallons on the property. The permit is for the tanks, in essence. The permit is also issued by the state fire marshal to construct and to store. So there are actually two permits in this case. And the other point about the training is we currently do train with Chelmsford. Matter of fact, we've invited them next month. We're doing a training session with Pan Am for derailments, actually it's this month, where we're actually doing a section of tracks with them, doing some exercises, and a couple other local fire departments. So they are working with us, and we're talking about doing more. So.
Okay, thank you. All right. I will take. Do you want to? Okay. I will take your comment, then I will end with you, and then I think if there are any further comments or questions on the board, then we will vote and move on. So, sir.
Yeah. So I'm Min Chuan Zhen from Joy Circle, 3 Joy Circle. So since this asphalt plant actually affects both the town of Chelmsford and the town of Westford, and there is an active litigation going on by the town of Chelmsford. So I appeal to the board that we will actually do not prematurely grant the permission, but wait until the litigation plays on.
Thank you. And You had the first word, you can have the last word.
No, I actually had a question about if this is a standard permit that we give for that specific zoning area. I know they mentioned we all have oil in our homes, but in my home I don't have 10,000 gallons of fuel. So is this something that's standard in town for
Yes,
this light
if
manufacturing?
this 10,000 gallon tank were going someplace else, it would still need to have the permits that it's applying
Okay,
for.
so are there other light manufacturing zoned areas that have this much storage on it in town?
I don't know, but it looks like somebody else might know.
Haley Oil has 40,000 gallons.
And that's light manufacturing.
Their home heating oil, manufacturing, delivery service. They have 4,300 gallons
I'm
of
just
fuel.
curious on what zone for.
It's actually in residential. Because it's it was way back when they owned the property and there was nothing around and there was no zoning. When they put this in, Cook Oil Concord Oil on Forge Village Road also has 20,000.
And were those something that was before zoning
Right,
was part?
yeah.
But anything since the
Yeah,
zoning's been
right,
implemented
yeah.
to protect us?
Yeah.
I could also say MIT has above ground storage, number 2 heating oil, 10,000, several 10,000 gallon tanks. Just to go off the top of my head here, Highway Department has over 10,000 gallons of diesel and over 10,000 gallons of gasoline, which is flammable storage. They have a license issued up there. The above ground tanks. I can't really think off the top of my head anyone else.
I think Red Hat actually has 10,000 gallons. No, it's above ground. It's on the roof.
Yeah.
It's on the roof of the building.
Okay, thank you.
And then I just wanted to, so
One last question, and then we really are I'm gonna throw it back to the board.
Okay. So it's a container and everything's contained, but there are some valves, I'm assuming, to let off. Or you said it's a closed system, but there are some valves, I would think, to let off gases.
No.
So there's no gas that's emitted from heated substance in this container? So there's no pressure release anywhere?
There are valves, of course. There's tanks. There's input.
I'm just curious
and
on what comes out of.
outputs. So there are valves.
But these are all approved tanks by the state fire marshal and by the local fire department. They're UL certified, so whatever is required out of those.
Right. So my point
and the Board
is.
of Health has to approve whatever emissions are going to be coming out of those
Okay.
tanks.
I understand that, but there's also this foam that, is that emitting anything, any kind of gas? Because that's being decided without the Board of Health.
The fire department behind you is shaking their heads no.
Nothing comes out of that. Okay, I'm asking because I want to know. I'm a mother, my kids go to school
that's
here.
Fine. No, I understand that, and that's why I was saying, because you couldn't see them, but they're shaking their heads no.
Okay, so I mean, this is a permit, this doesn't have to be given. I think it's something we should really make, as a board, I really am asking that you guys really think about what this means and, what it means for us, and giving that permit before the Board of Health has any input.
It's not a permit, it's a license.
It's a license. We're not doing anything
I
with
know.
the permit for the hazardous
I don't know all the
materials.
technicalities, but that's something that I just think with a lot of ongoing things going, I would also ask that this be thought about instead of made tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any further comments, questions from the board for anybody?
Just the only thing I heard, and Chief, you mentioned it already, but just if you could comment again on your intent to coordinate with the Chelmsford chief, sort of specifically on this, just have an explicit conversation about this and any training needs he may feel like he needs to have.
Like I say, we've already established some training. They've done some in the past, and we have this one coming up in May, the end of May, with Pan Am. And we'll see him and talk to him about this to see if he wants any review with us, just to see what's going in there so he understands it and everything else. I don't know what he's seen and what he hasn't seen yet.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Yep.
Doug, you
I just wanted to be clear with respect to training and cooperation with the Chelmsford Fire Department. Part of our other underlying permits, one of the things that was conditioned, was offered and then ultimately conditioned, was that my client is going to provide specialized training, tank training, confined space training, that kind of training to not only the Westford Fire Department but the Chelmsford Fire Department, and that's training that would be used to address a situation not only on our facility but at any other facility in town that has tanks. We have committed to do that. I believe it's a component of the permits for the plant itself that we are going to provide specialized training to both fire departments. So there has been, that is already set to occur.
Thank you, appreciate it. All right,
So what's necessary, just making the motion to approve. So I'll make a motion to approve the license with restrictions of, one, the manual shutoff valves on the number 2 for fuel oil tank and the liquid asphalt tanks, and that 2 30,000-gallon water cisterns be installed and functional as accepted by the fire chief prior to the issuance of any building permits.
is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you all, and we will make sure, I don't know when the Board of Health meeting is going to be held, but we'll certainly make sure that you all know so that you can attend that as well. Okay. Okay, we're moving along to our consent agenda. And we have a request to approve the following. A banner request for Memorial Day. Banner dates May 21st and 31st in front of the J.V. Fletcher Library. Town Common and Bandstand request event Memorial Day, May 28th from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. A farmer winery license. The applicant is Noel A. Powell of Aranap Cellars for the farmers market dates Tuesday, June 20th to October 31st from 2:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. And just for Elizabeth and Tom, this is like I think the third year that he has applied for this license, and he's been part of the farmers market. And a special license request for East Boston Camp's fundraiser on June 17th, 2017 from 6 to 11 p.m.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Old new business. We have a request from the Tax Possession Sale Committee to appoint Joe Fody as a full member with a term to expire June 30th, 2020. Is there a motion?
So moved.
To appoint? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. A request to name, approve, charge, and appoint the Finance Committee members Ingrid Nilsson as a full member and Heather Fitzpatrick as an alternate member to the new committee to examine possible personal and property tax relief for seniors, low-income, and disabled citizens is resolved by town meeting. And I know that we have a draft of a charge here in our packets, and Paul, and also an email from Paul Casson about the charge. So I have to find it. So hang on a minute. There we are. From Paul Fassbender. So have we looked at folks looked at the charge? Do we want to incorporate some of Paul's suggestions? And Mark, do you like the name, the new name of the committee?
Thank you. I love the name. And it fits like on the thing that you needed to fit
I don't
it
know.
on?
I assume it does, but, well, I think he wants to call it the,
Slider.
yeah,
What do you want to call it?
the slidder?
Yes.
Slidder?
Slitter.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay. This slid truck, something or other.
Paul's here, yeah?
Yeah, Paul.
Can you just, I would appreciate just, I did read through your comments, and I'm trying to figure out how, in a summary way, that those comments you have would get added to the charge that we
Yeah, I
have.
thought
It's
those
a
were
little
sort of covered.
long.
Paul Fassbender, Texas Road. I'm sorry I didn't do a better job of that. I was out of town at a funeral and so forth, so I didn't have a lot of time to respond to what was in the packet. But my concern was that, in my view, I think a charge should ideally be more concise and more general and leave the committee a little more latitude to do some things. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to make sure that however the charge gets written, that we aren't told to focus exclusively on the wording of Article 16, that we can do research in other areas, such as things that were brought up at the March 21st meeting at the Cameron Senior Center, and some of the things that were discussed on the floor of town meeting. So I'm not concerned that all these points get into the charge, I personally think that's way too long for a charge, and so forth. But I also would.
Oh, I certainly agree with you. I don't think that the committee is confined to Article 16 at all, and that certainly wasn't my intent.
Exactly.
Honestly, because I think, as we all agreed, Article 16, even those of us who, have read it 12 times, still don't understand what it says. So, no, my intent is, hey, you guys go explore, look at whatever you want, go survey all the other communities in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts if you want to, and find out what's out
Or
there.
other states.
Yeah,
Same thing, because that was the importance of the name, and prior to that, it was broader than these three particular categories. So for me, it's the name itself represents what the charge should be. It's for those three categories of income. That's what we're trying to find resolution for, whether it's in this state or, I know New York State has all different kinds of exemptions for school tax, and if you're living in town for a certain period of time, you're over a certain age, all those kinds of things. So
the other point I wanted to make, and probably didn't do a good job of, was the original article was for seniors only.
Yes.
On the floor of town meeting. We added two other populations,
yes,
which may have different demographics, different needs, and we may need different solutions for them.
Right.
So the committee may need to come back with 2 or 3 different proposals to address all those groups, and I think that would be the right thing to do.
I don't think Article 16 is, maybe it ends up being a part of this, but I don't think it's any of our intent that be the path forward.
I think a number of the people who looked at it said there's got to be a way to accomplish the same goals that are simpler to understand, simpler to administer, simpler to apply for, and basically treat people with a little more dignity and respect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So do we need to take this offline and
Yeah.
modify the language?
I think I was on vacation, Paul, last week, so I actually just saw this yesterday. I think my staff was trying to incorporate a lot, but I agree with you. I think it's way too detailed. But maybe we could edit it here right now and just
I was going to
streamline it.
Actually, I wanted that kind of one paragraph,
right,
3 sentences that's targeted but broad. And then these are objectives, and then we can add in more objectives as they go along, and the committee can add their own objectives, but
right.
These are going to be the subcategories of a charge.
The other thing is sometimes you appoint committees and they come back and tell you what they want their charge to be. So we could also
the objective is clear.
Right.
So I don't know how the objective could be any more clear than what the name of the committee is. So
maybe we leave it at that if they want to.
And leave the committee open to come back and present a new charter as necessary.
So just leave it right up to establish a committee to examine possible personal and property tax relief for seniors, low income, and disabled, period. And that can be the charge, and if they want to change it. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds good.
All right.
All right.
We need a motion to...
I need a motion to approve the name, the charge we just did, and appoint the FinCom members.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
It's up to Patty. Okay. Patty decides ties on seconds and motions. Already pushed aside.
I was waiting for it.
Okay. With Kelly and Don having left the board, they were our representatives to various committees. Listed, and I think we got them all, are the committees that they were representative to. So, I know that Elizabeth has already voiced an interest in the Bruce being our representative to the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. So, assuming that nobody has any objection to that, shall we appoint Elizabeth as our representative to the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next is the Westford Cable Access Television Board of Directors. Does anybody have an interest in that?
What's
I have no idea.
What's the fair share? Typically people sit on 2 or 3 of these, or what's the number?
Usually 2
or 6
3.
or 7.
No, no. And you are not on 6 or 7.
4.
Okay. Yeah, anywhere between, and depending what your schedule is and what you can manage, so.
I don't know what their schedule, I don't know what their.
And I have no
meeting
idea what the
is.
schedule of the Westford CAT is. We could find that out before we appoint somebody.
Okay. And it's either someone who is a selectman, or the selectman can actually appoint someone else to represent them. Is that true, too? I guess what Kelly told me.
Yeah, Steve's got an answer.
Westford Cat Board of Selectmen meets third Thursday of the month at 7 o'clock.
There you go. Thank you. Okay, so.
Well, I'm going to have to take some of these, right? So why don't I can do that one, and I also have an interest in the Transit Authority Advisory Board.
Okay. Nobody has ever been interested in the transit advisory.
Sort of fits in the economic development portfolio. So
Okay, excellent. All right, so is there a motion to appoint Tom to the to the committees he wants?
Quickly, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
Quickly, yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
12 North Main Street. I'll do 12 North Main
You know
Street.
what, Andrea, actually, since we're out with an RFP right now,
Okay.
I don't think it's necessary,
Great.
but when I appoint the group to look at the proposals, if you'd like to be on that,
I'll be on that.
that would be great. And you don't need to vote that. 'Cause
Okay.
It's pretty late to be joining that committee now.
Okay.
Okay.
The Dog Park Task Force, do any of us?
I'll volunteer for that one.
Okay, great. Is there a motion? Quick.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And then we have Northern Middlesex Council of Governments.
I'll also volunteer for that one.
Okay.
Wow.
So
Wow.
moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Then the next one is appointment of board representative for teacher negotiations. As the board knows, I've been the primary representative to the teacher negotiations, and Scott has been the alternate. It seems to make sense to me that Tom should be our primary representative to the ongoing negotiations, since he's been so involved, and he knows all of the sort of facts and figures and the give-backs that might be there.
And I will mention that my interest here is that we hold everyone accountable to student success in Westford, and make sure that, I think I'm in an unusual position to make sure that we get some of the changes that we need to make sure that we're doing the best for our students. And so I think I could be effective there.
So I have no problem giving up my primary role.
I've got no problem doing my alternate role, so.
So if you can be the primary and I'll be the alternate, and if that,
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And then I need to announce for the public that there is a vacancy on the school committee due to the resignation of Tom Clay. And I need to announce this in order to initiate the appointment process to fill the vacancy until the next town election. So if you are interested in filling the vacancy that's now on the school committee, you need to fill out a citizens activity form and submit it to town hall. The way this appointment works is that it will be a joint appointment by the school committee and the Board of Selectmen, and that joint meeting is scheduled for our May 23rd meeting. And the term is simply for 1 year until our next town elections, and at that point there will be an election for that vacancy. So anybody who's interested, please fill out a citizens activity form and submit it to town hall. Okay, next, request to consider second alternate in the Road and Bush bid documents for the purpose of adding air conditioning to the gym space at 65 Main Street.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Bill Kennison, Town's Engineering Inspector, Facilities Technician, and here tonight is the owner's project manager for the Road and Bush Community Center.
He needs 2 business cards.
I was going to say he needs a hat.
I'm here to ask you to consider adding gymnasium cooling back into the project as an add alternate. This is one of the things we cut out to try and get the budget down. We have, to explain an add alternate, we have one add alternate right now. It's as it says, it's an addition to the project. But it is a way of pricing things so that if the bids come in high, we cannot select an add alternate. and get the price down reasonably. If the bids come in favorably, we can add an ad alternate and get the extra work that we want to get done. Our first ad alternate is the roof and cupola work. I feel very confident we're going to be able to get that in the budget. I'd like to add, this is a second ad alternate, it's the cooling for the gym. If you look at some of the pictures, we have, the gym right now is heated by 3 heating units, warm air furnaces as they're called. This is one of them. There's 2 upright ones. Eric?
Sorry, my computer's falling apart.
As you notice, they were installed in June of '01. If you go to the next picture, Eric, those 2 pipes you see sticking out of the side belong to the cooling coil. In 2001, someone started this project. They put in heat and set up the 3 warm air furnaces so they could put cooling in. I don't know whether it was a budgetary consideration or why the project stopped there, but it never got air conditioning in the gym. Right now, the air goes in through this vent right here, 3 different units, gets ducted into the warm air furnace, and then comes out through 3 different sets of ducts across the ceiling. What the engineer has proposed is adding cooling to the center of these 3 furnaces. Eric, if you want to move on, I think we got a picture of that. That unit right there, which is up above one of the storage rooms. We'll add cooling into that unit. That should be enough to handle the whole gym. We'll add fresh air into all 3 units. Right now, there is no fresh air piped into those units. State recommends a minimum of 10% fresh air. This building's been here 120 years without fresh air being put into it.
Could use a little.
They do it with operable windows and doors. How cooling is handled in the gym right now is they open up the 2 doors closest to the parking lot.
Yeah.
And they have a couple big fans.
Yeah.
This creates a number of problems, obviously. Insects at night. It's a security hazard for the children because the doors are wide open. The children can either wander out or someone can wander in. So there's a number of reasons why we feel this should go into the project, the architect and I. Apparently the gym gets quite humid in the summertime to the point where condensation can build up on the floor when they come in on a Monday morning or sometimes just a weekday morning. There are actual puddles on the floor. It's a slab on grade, so the slab is cool, the room is hot, you get condensation, actually to the point where it gets very musty in there. We feel it's a good idea. I'd love to finish the project that was started 16 years ago. I feel very comfortable putting this back in as an ad alternate. One, we don't have to choose it if we don't have the money for it, but we've received a very favorable cost estimate. I feel we have a lot of contingency built into the cost estimate. The estimator has built in a contingency, the architect has built in a contingency, and on top of that we have a 12% construction contingency. I feel we're pretty well covered. I've built a number of large projects and I've never had this kind of contingency over cost estimate ever. So I'd ask that you consider it. I feel very confident we're going to be able to bring this project in on budget successfully.
Questions? Yeah, Mark.
So the only thing we're really committing to is giving Don another $37.50.
No, you're just committing to us including this.
No, I know it's an
bid.
add-all too, but he also.
That's right, you're right, yeah, that is something that
In order
didn't
to
get.
do that, he
right,
wants another
you're right,
$37.50
you're right,
to,
that wasn't spelled out, right.
Yes, there's engineering work involved, there's architectural work involved. We took it out of the drawings, it has to go back in. Yes, it's partially prepped, but there is work involved.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
That is true, and it wasn't
So-
put on the agenda like that.
Yeah. No, it's all right, but reading through his letter, he
Yeah,
states it.
right. Scott?
A lot of the funding is coming from the CPC, right? So the bid alternate 2 would be made possible if we come in below budget for the expected work, which means would be the CPC would need to approve this bid alternate 2 as well?
I assume the air conditioning would be
They wouldn't
CPC.
have to. The way it is right now is it's part of the project. If it becomes part of the project, it's very integral to the project. We're adding HVAC to the rest of the building. We're completely redoing the mechanical systems in the building. This just extends it out to the gym area. It was part of the original project. We sliced it out trying to get the budget down. The budget looks favorable at this point. I don't know that CPC
I don't
would have to-
honestly think, we don't typically go back for those kinds of things, but if you want us to, we certainly can. It's just the clock is ticking.
I'm just asking whether we are.
I think it comes within the HVAC
Okay.
and mechanical systems that is already approved, so.
Okay.
The worst case, we'd have to pay for it outside of
Yeah.
CPC.
Yeah.
And this is just asking permission to put it as an alternate. I mean, ultimately, this board will have another shot at approving whether or not we go forward with it.
Right.
Because
I would
as
say,
we get the bids back, the architect will make a recommendation to myself and Jody and the Permanent Town Building Committee. And then we'll ask Jody and Eric to bring this forward
You know,
for the contract.
I think what we should do, though, is probably shoot them an email and just tell them
Yeah.
that what the cost estimates came in and that we asked you if we could add this, just to keep them in the loop.
I think
So
that makes
I will
sense.
do
I think,
that.
I think fellow board courtesy would be.
Yes, right, okay.
Okay, so, so we,
You need a motion?
I need a motion.
I'll make a motion to include the gymnasium HVAC as an adult 2, and to provide an additional $3,750 for additional compensation to, I suppose it's Mills Whitaker.
Yep.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Eric, you're up.
Yes, all right. So, in the process of doing the request for
Thanks, Bill.
proposals
Thank you, Bill.
and drafting the lease for the Road and Bush buildings,
Thank you.
currently in Road and Bush's lease agreement, they pay what's known as additional rent. It's for sewer usage, trash, telephone, and plowing. So, I kind of, in your letter that I provided in your packet, I kind of went over what they're currently paying versus what we think the actual costs are for each of these. The big one that stuck out for us was the sewer usage, which is comprised of the Frost and the Road and Bush buildings that are connected to the Abbott treatment plant. The old NAB building has its own Title V septic system, which they are responsible for pumping, and they have been pumping. Bill checked the records. So we are bringing this information before you to get some direction on what you'd like to see in the RFP. We have to issue an addendum to include this into the RFP document. We didn't want to hold up the bid process, so it's on the streets right now. We put it out on May 3rd, and they're going to be coming back on June 2nd. But in the meantime, following the direction from the board, we're going to issue the addendum with the updated additional rent figures.
So just to do the math, it's basically 11,500 would be the actual charges. And right now it's about 1,400 or whatever that.
1880.
18, so.
So I have a question about that.
Yeah.
Is that, so if Road and Bush isn't operating at all, does the cost of the wastewater treatment facility go down by 24%, or is that budget, a certain amount of it's fixed and the usage?
That if we just took those buildings out of the equation and they had a Title V septic system, those costs would be just redivided out to the buildings connected.
Okay.
The cost doesn't really go down, it's just they have to continue to operate, and actually it's better when you have more effluent than less to keep them going, but
okay,
it doesn't really change the costs.
Okay.
And I will add, if you don't mind, we did do a 33% reduction because we asked the architect to give us some rough figures on water consumption with post-construction, and that's what you'll see in the chart that was included in your packet. Just shows some figures anticipating water consumption dropping by 33%, but the big water usage, it comes from Frost School.
All those little children. Mark.
Yeah, so this is really all about the future contract, not the existing one. So if I understand the wastewater from the treatment plant, so currently the lease has us paying $2,000. It's costing really about $10,000. Everything else is kind of whatever they're paying, roughly what it costs us to do it. So I would recommend that we include the actual amount of the wastewater portion of this thing. So if we need to increase it by $8,000 in the RFP, then we should do that. So if you go through this letter, right, the true cost is about $10,000, and we're asking the current lessee for $2,000.
I think it's about 11.5 is what I came
Once you
up
divide out the maintenance for the pumps too, it's we budget an additional
Okay,
9,000.
so, yeah, I'm just
I was
talking.
gonna say, whatever that, I agree with you, whatever that amount is, okay, is, yes, we should.
It should be full
include-
amount.
Right.
Full allocation, not a
I will
subsidy.
say I ran into their board member yesterday and was talking a little bit, and he seemed to understand that you know, they should be paying their fair share. So he wasn't speaking for the board,
Sure.
but he didn't seem to have a
So the
strong
propo-
objection, but.
So the proposal is just that it all gets marked to, I guess, forecast.
Yeah, based on the 10-year average.
Okay. Sounds fair?
Okay, so is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Patty was.
So we're
right.
gonna call it forecast, not a set number?
You know, you're talking now about 2020, right?
Right.
So it can't be a set number.
Okay, so I just want
Yeah,
to be
yes,
clear
yes.
that it's basically.
Yeah, I meant forecast, so you're incorporating the anticipated water savings. You're not going to use last year. You're going to use what the expected usage is.
Well, what we essentially did was we just took this 10-year average and we backed out 33% reduction on the road and rush billing,
Right.
which is where we came up with those figures.
Okay.
So I just think when you're
call it
doing these,
actuals or-
you know, some of these have inflationary impacts.
Yeah.
So this one probably not so much, but when you're talking about snow plowing and, you know, some of the other ones, they do have inflationary impacts. So I would just ask to make sure you,
We could call it, you know, the actual costs of these services if you want.
Right.
So, yeah, okay.
that are estimated to be. what
Best
they're-
estimate to actual
Yeah.
cost.
Okay,
That makes sense.
okay.
So you made the motion.
Yes.
Who seconded it?
Second.
Tom? Okay.
That's got that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Man, one other thing to add.
Okay, we have minutes, and I guess,
I just need to abstain from the first one.
you need to,
And we would abstain from all of them, right?
So you
oh,
probably can't, well, if you need me to, I mean, I don't have to abstain, even though I wasn't there.
I think, yeah, I mean, if three, what happens if three people abstain and only two people can approve the minutes?
Well, you can't do that.
Okay.
And
So I'll go ahead.
you
I just-
can vote for minutes that you're
Right.
not
Right.
at.
All right.
So I
that
will
would-
vote.
Just voting to put them in. Right, that's
We're
right.
just
You're
voting to
putting
put them in the record,
right.
okay.
Right.
So we have minutes for approval for release of January 19th, 2017, a regular session joint with the FinCom, January 26th, 2017, regular session joint with FinCom, March 25th, 2017, regular session, March 27th, 2017, regular session, March 28th, 2017, regular session, and April 12th, 2017, regular session. Is there a?
I just
Yes.
have, I had mailed to Patty late this afternoon and Jody, I had one minor correction
Okay,
on the
which-
March 28th meeting minutes on page 3, where it says Selectman Cost said he thought the Board of Health was working within the four corners of the agreement. I'm pretty sure I said they were not. I felt they were not.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was. So we could just make that amendment to that?
Yeah,
minutes?
so it would be,
Okay.
is not working within
Yeah.
the four corners, it's just adding the word
Oh,
not.
wait a minute, there was, hang on a minute, because there was something that I saw that I wanted, and now I can't find it. Bear with me for 1 minute.
Mhm. Sounds like.
Oh, I know,
Somebody said this.
What's the Jeopardy theme song? Do, 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 do.
Oh, yeah.
okay, actually, I think that's okay, never mind. Okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
Wait.
No, I think I'm pretty good. Oh, that's it, yes. Okay, wait a minute, I did find it. On the March 25th minutes, Patty? It was
Question.
town meeting? It was town meeting?
Yeah.
You wrote, the first part's fine, Selectmen talk, this was when we were discussing the ballot, placing the override on the ballot. And you wrote, Mark recused himself from discussions. Town meeting voted to place the question on the ballot to be voted on by residents at the May 2nd, 2017 election. Actually, town meeting didn't vote to place the override on the ballot. Town meeting voted passing the override. It's the Board of Selectmen who voted to place the override on the ballot.
Yeah, good catch. Yep.
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion to recommend the minutes for the regular sessions of January 19th, January 26th, March 25th, March 27th, March 28th, April 12th, with the minor amendments to the March 25th and March 28th minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Abstain?
You abstain.
Okay.
As well. I'm abstaining.
All right, any board reports or updates? Okay, seeing none. Town managers report, that would be you.
Yeah, so it's pretty brief because I wasn't here. But one is to request to approve, I'm going to just say A. B, we're going to continue to 5/23 because I want the permanent town building committee to review that. Though that number did go to town meeting, but I'd still like to see what they have to say. So I'm requesting you approve the assignment and assumption of the contract with our existing bituminous concrete excavation by Cold Planer, provider Costello Industries to PJ Keating Company.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Does anybody have any comments on correspondence?
Make motion to waive reading correspondence.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Do we have stuff?